The cargo ship, Haidong Prosperity, moved through the darkness of space like a metal whale swimming through an endless ocean. Inside the ship, Captain Daeho sat in his command chair and watched the stars blur past the window. He had been flying these trade routes for 20 years, carrying goods from one human colony to another. It was boring work most days, and that was exactly how he liked it. Boring meant safe. Behind him, the young navigator Ji-Wan checked her instruments for the 100th time that hour. She was nervous, and it showed. This was only her second long journey into deep space, and she jumped at every strange sound the old ship made. Daeho smiled to himself. He had been like that once, many years ago. Down in the engine room, Taemin was doing what he always did. He moved between the massive machines that powered the ship, checking readings and making small adjustments. The engines hummed their steady song, and Taemin listened to that song like a musician listening to an orchestra. He could hear when something was wrong before any computer could tell him. The rest of the crew went about their daily tasks. 15 people in total called the Haidong home. They ate together, worked together, and complained about the food together. They were not soldiers or heroes. They were just workers trying to make a living among the stars. Daeho was thinking about what he would eat for dinner when the alarm started screaming. Every screen on the bridge turned red. Ji-Wan gasped, and her hands flew across her control panel. "Captain! Unknown ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel directly ahead of us!" Before Daeho could respond, the entire ship shuddered. Sparks exploded from one of the control panels. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency lighting. Ji-Wan's voice was shaking now. "We've been hit with an electromagnetic pulse. Engines are offline. I can't get navigation back." Daeho grabbed the communication device and shouted into it. "All crew, this is the captain. We are under attack. Get to the emergency stations now." His mind was racing. Pirates. It had to be pirates. In 20 years, he had never been boarded, but he knew the stories. He knew what came next. Through the window, he could see the attacking ship sliding alongside them. It was 3 times the size of the Haidong, covered in armor plates and weapons. As Daeho watched, a docking tube extended from the pirate ship like a metal tentacle reaching out to grab them. There was a heavy thud as it connected to their hull. Down in engineering, Taemin heard the alarm and understood immediately what was happening. He ran to the weapons locker that every merchant ship kept for emergencies. Inside were 3 plasma rifles and some basic body armor. He grabbed a rifle and started pulling on the armor as fast as he could. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to move. If pirates were boarding, he was going to fight. The airlock door exploded inward with a blast that echoed through the entire ship. The first pirate came through the smoke, and Taemin got his first look at a Vexillian corsair. The creature stood over 2 meters tall on 2 thick legs. Its body was covered in scales that looked like dark green metal. But what made Taemin freeze was the 4 arms. 4 arms, each one holding a weapon or a tool. The alien's head was narrow and reptilian, with eyes that reflected the emergency lights like a cat's eyes in the dark. Taemin raised his rifle and fired. The plasma bolt hit the pirate in the shoulder, and the creature screamed and fell back. But 5 more Vexillians pushed through behind it, firing their own weapons. Taemin dove behind a cargo container as the shots tore through the metal walls around him. He tried to fire back, but there were too many of them. Within seconds, he felt a heavy weight slam into his back, and he crashed to the floor. One of the Vexillians pressed him down with 2 of its 4 arms, while the other 2 took his weapon away. On the bridge, Daeho was frantically trying to send a distress signal. His fingers moved across the emergency communication panel. If he could just get one message out, just one signal to Earth authorities, maybe they would send help. Maybe the crew had a chance. The door to the bridge exploded open and 3 Vexillians rushed in. Jiwan screamed. Daeho kept working on the panel, typing as fast as he could. He felt the alien hands grab him, all 4 arms wrapping around his body like steel cables, but his finger hit the final button. The distress beacon activated and began broadcasting their position into space. A Vexillian struck Daeho across the face with the back of one scaled hand. Pain exploded in his jaw, and he tasted blood. Through blurred vision, he saw them dragging Jiwan away. She was crying and struggling, but the aliens were too strong. One of the Vexillians spoke in heavily accented human language. "No fight. You come with us now. You valuable, worth much money." The crew of the Haidong Prosperity was rounded up like animals. The Vexillians moved through the ship with practiced efficiency, finding every hiding spot and forcing every human out into the cargo bay. Daeho counted heads as they were pushed together. 15. Everyone was here. Some had cuts and bruises from resisting, but everyone was alive. That was something at least. The leader of the Vexillian boarding party was a massive creature that the others called Raxthar. He walked in front of the captured humans and looked at them with something that might have been amusement. When he spoke, his voice was rough and deep, like rocks grinding together. "You are hostages now. Your people will pay money for you. Much money. Then you go home. You understand? No fight, no problem. You fight, you die. Simple." The humans were forced through the docking tube and into the pirate ship. Daeho looked back at the Haidong one last time before he was shoved through the airlock. His ship, his home for so many years, now dark and dead and empty. He wondered if he would ever see it again. Inside the Vexillian vessel, the humans were separated and locked into individual cells. The cells were small metal boxes, barely big enough to stand up in. There was a hard bench, a waste disposal unit, and nothing else. Jiwan was in the cell next to Daeho, and he could hear her crying through the wall. "Captain!" Her voice was small and frightened. "What's going to happen to us?" Daeho pressed his hand against the cold metal wall, wishing he could reach through it to comfort her. "They want ransom money. They'll contact Earth and demand payment. It's going to be okay." But even as he said the words, Daeho wasn't sure if he believed them. He had heard stories about the Vexillian corsairs. They had been operating for decades, taking hostages from dozens of different species, and the stories said that most species paid the ransom because it was easier than fighting. But Daeho also knew something about Earth's policies that these pirates might not know, something that had been implemented years ago after a terrible incident. He kept that knowledge to himself for now. No point in scaring the crew more than they already were. He would wait and see what happened when the pirates contacted Earth. He would wait and hope that his distress beacon had gotten through. In the command center of the pirate ship, Raxthar was already composing his ransom message. He had done this hundreds of times before with other species. Humans were new to the galaxy, relatively speaking. Soft merchant types, according to his database. They would pay. They always paid. He smiled with his reptilian mouth and began recording his demands. 50 million credits per hostage, 750 million total. It would be a good profit for a few days of work. He sent the message toward Earth and settled back to wait. In his experience, it took most species about a week to gather the money and arrange the transfer. Some tried to negotiate the price down. Some begged and pleaded. But in the end, they all paid. Hostages were valuable, and nobody wanted the blood of their own people on their hands. Raxthar had no idea that he had just made the worst mistake of his very long life. The message from the Vexillian pirates arrived at the Terran Defense Coalition headquarters on Luna 3 days after the Haidong Prosperity went silent. The headquarters was a massive complex built into the moon's surface, where humanity coordinated all of its military and defense operations across dozens of star systems. Admiral Kyung-soo was in his office reviewing supply reports when his assistant knocked on the door. The young man looked pale and worried. "Sir, we have a hostage situation. The merchant vessel Hedong Prosperity. 15 crew members taken by Vexillian corsairs." Kyung-soo stood up immediately. He was a tall man with gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too many battles. He had been with the Defense Coalition since its founding, back when humanity was just beginning to explore beyond their own solar system. "Play the message," he said. They walked quickly to the command center, a huge room filled with screens and computers and dozens of officers working at their stations. On the main screen, a massive reptilian face appeared. The Vexillian spoke in rough human language, clearly reading from a script. "I am Raxthar of the Vexillian Corsairs. We have captured 15 human crew members from the ship Hedong Prosperity. If you want them returned alive and unharmed, you will pay 50 million credits for each hostage. Total payment of 750 million credits. You have 10 standard days to transfer the money to the coordinates we provide. If you do not pay, the hostages will be sold as slaves to the highest bidder. If you attempt military action, the hostages will be executed. You have been warned." The screen showed footage of the captured crew sitting in cells, looking scared and hurt. Then the message ended and the screen went dark. The command center was completely silent. Every officer had stopped working and was staring at the admiral, waiting for his response. Kyung-soo looked at the dark screen for a long moment, then turned to his staff. "Get me everything we have on the Vexillian Corsairs. I want to know where they operate, how many ships they have, and where they might be holding our people. And somebody contact Intelligence Officer Hana. I want her in here now." Within 30 minutes, the command center had become a war room. Officers rushed back and forth with reports and data files. Large screens displayed star maps and tactical information, and standing at the center of it all was Hana, the Defense Coalition's top intelligence analyst. Hana was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been tracking pirate activity in the outer sectors for 5 years. When she spoke, everyone listened. The Vexillian Corsairs are one of the oldest criminal organizations in known space. They've been operating for over a century. Their business model is simple. They capture high-value targets, demand ransom, and then release the hostages once payment is made. According to our records, they've taken hostages from at least 30 different species. Admiral Kyung-soo interrupted her. "Have they ever killed hostages?" Hana shook her head. "Not that we know of. They're criminals, but they're smart criminals. Dead hostages are bad for business. As long as species keep paying the ransoms, the Vexillians keep their hostages alive and in relatively good condition. It's a system that has worked for them for a very long time." "What about their base of operations?" "That's where it gets tricky," Hana said, bringing up a star map on the main screen. "They don't have a fixed location. They operate from a mobile fortress station called the Shattered Chain. It's essentially a small city floating in space, constantly moving through unclaimed territory. They've been very good at avoiding military action, because most species don't want to risk their hostages by attacking." Kyung-soo studied the map carefully. Red dots marked known Vexillian sightings and attacks over the past year. There were dozens of them, spread across multiple sectors. "How many other cells do they have?" "Intelligence suggests at least 8 major operational cells, each with multiple ships and holding facilities. The Shattered Chain is their flagship and headquarters, but they have smaller operations scattered throughout this entire region of space." The Admiral nodded slowly, his mind already working through the problem. Then he turned to address the entire command center. "All right, listen up. I'm authorizing Operation Broken Chain. We have 15 human citizens in enemy hands, and we're going to get them back. I want the 3rd Rapid Response Fleet mobilized immediately. All 6 warships led by the Incheon's Fury. Contact Colonel Min-ji and tell her to prepare her Special Forces team for hostile boarding operations. This is a full military response." One of the younger officers raised his hand nervously. "Sir, what about the ransom?" Shouldn't we at least open negotiations? 750 million credits is a lot of money, but the fleet deployment will cost even more. And if we attack, the pirates might execute the hostages. Kyung-soo looked at the young officer with an expression that was not unkind, but very serious. Son, let me tell you something about human policy when it comes to hostages. 20 years ago, during the early days of space exploration, human ships were targeted constantly by pirates and criminals. We paid ransoms, tried to negotiate, did everything we could to get our people back safely. And do you know what happened? More attacks, more hostages, more demands. The criminals saw us as easy targets because we always paid. The admiral walked to the center of the room, and every eye was on him. So Earth's unified government made a decision: no more ransom payments ever. If someone takes human hostages, we don't negotiate. We don't pay. We send in the military and we take our people back by force. It's a hard policy, and yes, it's risky. But it works. Because once criminals understand that taking humans hostage will only result in military retaliation, they stop taking humans hostage. That's the point. He turned back to the main screen. These Vexillians think they can treat us like all the other species they've robbed. They think we'll pay because everyone pays. They're about to learn something very important about humanity. We don't abandon our own people. And we sure as hell don't pay criminals for the privilege of getting them back. Within hours, the 3rd Rapid Response Fleet was preparing to launch from the shipyards above Earth. The fleet consisted of 6 warships, all armed with the latest human weapons technology. Leading them was the Incheon's Fury, a massive assault carrier that served as both a warship and a troop transport. On board the Incheon's Fury, Colonel Minji was briefing her soldiers. The 77th Reaver Battalion was humanity's elite Special Forces unit. These men and women were trained for the most dangerous missions, boarding enemy vessels, rescuing hostages, and fighting in the tight corridors of space stations where conventional warfare didn't work. Minji was a veteran of a dozen boarding actions. She was not a tall woman, but she carried herself with absolute confidence. When she spoke, her soldiers listened. "All right, Reavers, here's the situation. 15 civilians taken by Vexillian pirates. Our job is to get them back alive. Intelligence says the Vexillians are holding them on their fortress station, the Shattered Chain. It's big, it's heavily defended, and it's going to be a tough fight." She pulled up images of Vexillian warriors on the screen. "These are what we're up against. They're big, they're strong, and they have 4 arms. Don't underestimate them. But also don't forget your training. We're faster, we're smarter, and we're fighting for our own people. That gives us an edge." One of the soldiers raised a question. "What if the pirates threaten to kill the hostages if we attack?" Minji's expression hardened. "Then we move faster. The Admiral is giving them one chance to surrender peacefully. If they don't take it, we go in hard and we go in fast. Our goal is to secure the hostages before the enemy can react. Speed and violence of action, just like we've trained. Any other questions?" There were none. The Reavers began checking their equipment and preparing their weapons. They would be ready when the time came. Back in the command center, Admiral Kyung-soo composed a response message to the Vexillian pirates. It was not a negotiation. It was not a plea. It was a statement of fact. "This is Admiral Kyung-soo of the Terran Defense Coalition. You are holding 15 human citizens hostage. This is your only warning. Release them unharmed within 24 hours, or you will face military action. We do not negotiate ransoms. We do not make deals with criminals. You have one day to do the right thing." Then he did something that shocked his own staff. He attached the current coordinates of the 3rd Rapid Response Fleet to the message. He was showing the Vexillians exactly where the human warships were and exactly where they were going. Hana looked at him in surprise. "Sir, you're showing them our fleet position?" Kyung-soo smiled grimly. "I want them to know we're coming. I want them to know this isn't a bluff. Maybe they'll be smart and release the hostages. But if they're not smart, at least they can't say they weren't warned." The message was sent across space toward the last known location of Vexillian activity. Now, all they could do was wait and see if the pirates would take the warning seriously. The fleet continued its journey toward the outer sectors, moving faster than any merchant vessel could travel. They would arrive in 3 days. Kyung-soo stood in front of the main screen watching the stars. Somewhere out there, 15 human citizens were sitting in cells, scared and hoping for rescue. He made them a silent promise. "We're coming. Hold on just a little longer. We're coming for you." Captain Dae-ho had lost track of how many days he had been locked in the metal cell. There were no windows, no clocks, and the lights never changed. The Vexillians brought food twice a day, some kind of paste that tasted like cardboard mixed with oil. It was barely edible, but Dae-ho forced himself to eat it. He needed to stay strong. His crew needed him to stay strong. Through the thin walls, he could hear the other crew members. Sometimes someone would cry. Sometimes someone would shout in anger. Mostly there was just silence and the constant hum of the ship's engines. Ji-won was in the cell next to his, and they had developed a system of tapping on the wall to communicate. 3 taps meant, "Are you okay?" 2 taps back meant yes. It wasn't much, but it helped. On the 4th day, something changed. Dae-ho heard loud voices in the corridor outside his cell. The voices were speaking in the Vexillian language, which he didn't understand, but he could hear the tone. They sounded angry. They sounded worried. Then he heard something that made his heart beat faster. Alarms, distant alarms echoing through the station. The cell door opened and a Vexillian guard stood there, all 4 arms holding weapons. "You, come." The alien grabbed Dae-ho with 2 of its hands and pulled him out into the corridor. Other guards were doing the same with the rest of the crew. They were all herded together into a larger room that looked like some kind of cafeteria or meeting hall. Dae-ho quickly counted heads. 15. Everyone was still here. Ji-won stood next to him, looking thin and scared, but alive. Taemin had a bruise on his face, but was standing straight and tall. The crew gathered close together, taking comfort in being reunited, even if just for a moment. Raxthar, the Vexillian leader, entered the room. He did not look as confident as he had when they first arrived. His scales seemed darker somehow, and his movements were jerky and nervous. He stared at the human hostages for a long moment before speaking. "Your people are fools. We gave warning. We gave demands. Simple business transaction. But your people, they send warships. Military fleet." Some of the crew gasped. Dae-ho felt a cold smile cross his face. So his distress beacon had worked. Earth had received the message, and Earth had responded exactly the way he hoped they would. Raxthar continued, his voice getting louder. "You think this is good news? You think military rescue is coming? You are wrong. If human ships attack, you all die. We kill you first, then we fight. This is what happens when people don't follow the rules." But Dae-ho could see the fear in the alien's eyes. Raxthar was trying to sound threatening, but he was scared. The captain had seen enough frightened people in his life to recognize it, even in an alien face. "You've never dealt with humans before, have you?" Dae-ho said quietly. Raxthar turned to look at him. "What you say?" "I said you've never taken human hostages before. You've been doing this for years with other species, but this is your first time with humans, and you didn't do your research." The Vexillian leader walked closer, looming over Dae-ho with his greater height. "We know enough. Humans are merchants, soft, weak. You pay ransoms like everyone else." Dae-ho laughed, and it was not a happy sound. "No, we really don't. Humans have a very specific policy about hostages. We don't negotiate, we don't pay. We send in soldiers and we take our people back. Every single time. You didn't kidnap valuable hostages. You kidnapped an excuse for our military to come here and destroy you." For a moment, Raxthar just stared at him. Then the alien struck Dae-ho across the face with the back of one scaled hand. The captain fell to the floor, tasting blood. Jiwon cried out and tried to help him, but guards held her back. Raxithar pointed at Daeho with 2 of his 4 arms. "You lie to make me afraid. It won't work. Your people will pay or you all die. Simple." But as the guards dragged the humans back to their cells, Daeho could see that his words had affected the Vexillian leader. Good. Let him be afraid. Let him understand what kind of enemy he had made. In his cell again, Daeho touched his swollen jaw carefully. It hurt, but nothing was broken. He heard Jiwon tapping on the wall. 3 taps. "Are you okay?" He tapped back twice. "Yes." Then he added 3 more taps, a pattern they hadn't used before. He hoped she would understand. "Be ready." Somewhere far away, but getting closer every hour, the 3rd Rapid Response Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vexillian system. Admiral Kyung-soo stood on the bridge of the Inchen's Fury and looked at the tactical display. There on the screen was the shattered chain. The Vexillian fortress station was huge, roughly the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and surrounded by smaller ships. "Communications," Kyung-soo said. "Broadcast on all frequencies. I want everyone in this system to hear this." The communications officer nodded. "All frequencies open, sir. You're broadcasting." Kyung-soo spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Admiral Kyung-soo of the Terran Defense Coalition to the Vexillian Corsairs. You are currently holding 15 human citizens hostage aboard your station. This is your final warning. Release them immediately, and you will be permitted to leave this system. Refuse, and your station will be destroyed. You have 10 minutes to respond." On the shattered chain, Raxthar received the message in his command center. Around him, other Vexillian officers were panicking. He had spent the last day trying to contact other Corsair cells for help, for advice, for anything. What he learned terrified him. The humans had been hunting Vexillian operations across 3 sectors. 4 other cells had been destroyed in the past week. The humans weren't just coming for their hostages. They were waging war on the entire Corsair network. One of his advisors, an older Vexillian named Krell, spoke urgently. "We should release the humans. This is too dangerous. We've never faced military action like this before." But Raxthar's pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. He had built his reputation on never backing down from ransom negotiations. If he surrendered now, he would look weak. Other species would stop paying. The entire business model would collapse. "No. We show them we are serious. We show them that humans are not special." He ordered his crew to bring Captain Daeho to the command center. When the human arrived, surrounded by guards, Raxthar activated the recording system. He wanted the human military to see this. He pulled out a plasma pistol and pointed it at Daeho's head with one of his 4 hands. Daeho looked at the weapon and then at Raxthar. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just stared at the Vexillian leader with calm, steady eyes. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Raxthar ignored him and spoke to the camera. "Human fleet. You see this? If you attack, all hostages die. Starting with this one. You have 10 minutes to turn around and leave. Then we talk about Ransom again. If you don't leave, he dies. Then the others die. This is your choice." He sent the recording to the human fleet and waited for them to respond. Surely they would back down now. Surely they wouldn't risk their people's lives. No species had ever called his bluff before. The response came back within 2 minutes. Admiral Kyung-soo's voice was cold and hard. "Your threat is noted. You now have 8 minutes to release all hostages unharmed. After that, we will commence our assault. What you choose to do with our people in that time will determine whether we take any prisoners when we board your station. The choice is yours." Raxthar stared at the communication screen in disbelief. They weren't backing down. They weren't negotiating. They were actually going to attack, hostages or no hostages. He looked at Captain Daeho, and the human smiled at him. "I told you, Daeho said. "We don't do ransom negotiations. We don't abandon our people. And we definitely don't give in to threats. You chose the wrong species to mess with." Around the command center, the Vexillian officers were looking at their leader with fear and doubt. Krell spoke again, more urgently this time. "Raxthar, we must surrender. Release the hostages. We can't fight a full human battle fleet. We've never had to fight anyone before." "We're not prepared for this." But Raxthar's pride had backed him into a corner. He couldn't surrender now. Not after sending that threat. He would look like a coward. So he made a decision that would seal his fate. "Prepare for battle. Move all hostages to the prison ship Bloodclaw. If the humans attack, we use the prison ship to escape while they're busy fighting. We take the hostages with us." It was a desperate plan, and everyone in the room knew it. But no one dared to argue with Raxthar anymore. Orders were given, and the Vexillian Corsairs prepared for the first real military battle they had faced in decades. Back in his cell, being dragged out once again by guards, Daeho heard the alarms getting louder. He heard shouted orders and running feet. The station was preparing for war. He tapped on the wall as they pulled him past G1's cell. 3 short taps, 3 long taps, 3 short taps. The old Earth signal for distress, SOS. G1 tapped back. 1 single, solid tap. "Understood." Tae-min, in his own cell down the corridor, was working on something the guards hadn't noticed. The cell locks were old and poorly maintained. He had been studying them for days, looking for weaknesses. He had worked as an engineer for 15 years. He knew machines, and he knew how to break them. His fingers worked carefully at the access panel inside his cell, using a piece of bent metal he had pulled from his bed frame. The countdown continued. 5 minutes until the human fleet attacked. The Vexillians rushed to move their human hostages to the prison ship, not knowing that the humans they had captured were preparing their own form of resistance, not knowing that human special forces were already loading into assault pods, ready to launch, not knowing that they had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to take humans hostage. The hostages weren't leverage. They were the reason the humans were coming, and humans would burn down the entire station to get their people back. The 10 minutes passed in silence. Admiral Kyung-soo stood on the bridge of the Inchen's Fury and watched the countdown reach 0. The Vexillians had not responded. They had not released the hostages. They had made their choice, and now they would face the consequences. "All ships, commence attack," Kyung-soo said calmly. "Target their defense platforms first. Clear a path for the assault pods. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Any Vexillian ship or weapon that poses a threat to our forces is to be destroyed. But remember, our people are somewhere on that station. Watch your fire." The 6 human warships opened fire at the same time. Missiles streaked through space toward the shattered chain, each one guided by advanced targeting computers. The Vexillian defense platforms tried to shoot them down, but human weapons technology was decades more advanced. Explosions bloomed across the station's outer hull as the platforms were systematically destroyed. Inside the station, the impact of the missiles shook everything. Raxthar grabbed onto his command console to keep from falling. Around him, screens were showing damage reports and casualty numbers. His station, his fortress that had been safe for so many years, was being torn apart by human weapons. "Return fire!" he screamed. "Destroy those ships!" But the Vexillian weapons were old and outdated. Their energy cannons and missile systems had been designed for intimidation, not for fighting modern warships. Most of their shots missed completely. The few that hit were absorbed by the human ship's shields. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. On the Incheon's Fury, Colonel Min-ji gave the order to her reavers. "All teams, launch assault pods. Remember your objectives. Find the hostages, secure them, and get them out. Everything else is secondary. Go, go, go." 40 assault pods launched from the carrier, each one carrying a 4-person team of Special Forces soldiers. The pods were small, fast, and heavily armored. They streaked toward the shattered chain like metal bullets, dodging the defensive fire that tried to stop them. Most of the pods made it through. A few were hit and spun off course, their crews lost. But the majority punched through the station's hull exactly where Intelligence Officer Hana said the prison sections would be. The first pod crashed through the outer wall of the station in a shower of sparks and torn metal. The 4 Reavers inside kicked open the pod door and poured out into the corridor, their weapons ready. They wore powered combat armor that made them look like metal monsters, covered in weapons and sensors. The armor made them stronger and faster than any normal human could be. A Vexillian guard appeared at the end of the corridor, all 4 of his arms holding weapons. He fired, and the plasma bolts hit the lead Reaver in the chest. The armor absorbed the impact, and the soldier didn't even slow down. He raised his rifle and fired back. The Vexillian went down screaming. This same scene played out across the station as more pods arrived. The Reavers moved through the corridors like a storm, fast and deadly. The Vexillian guards had never faced soldiers like this before. They were used to intimidating unarmed merchants and weak species. They were not ready for human special forces. Minji led her own team toward the center of the prison complex. Her armor's computer was showing her a map of the station based on scans from the fleet. The hostages should be somewhere ahead. She kicked open a door and her team swept into the room beyond, weapons tracking for targets. Empty. She moved to the next door. Also empty. Reaver 6 to all teams, she broadcast over the tactical network. We're not finding hostages in the expected location. Spread out and search. They may have moved them. On the prison ship Bloodclaw, still docked inside the station, Raxthar was trying to evacuate. He had ordered all the human hostages brought to the ship so he could escape while the humans were busy fighting. But things were falling apart faster than he expected. Half his guards were dead or running away. The human soldiers were everywhere, cutting through his defenses like they weren't even there. The humans were being dragged through the corridors toward the Bloodclaw. Captain Daeho stumbled as a guard shoved him forward. Around him, his crew looked terrified. The station shook with explosions and the sound of weapons fire was getting closer. This was the most dangerous moment. If the Vexillians panicked, they might start killing hostages just out of spite. They reached the airlock to the Bloodclaw, and the guards started pushing them through. Daeho was third in line when he heard a sound that made his heart leap. Human voices, shouting in English, the sound of human weapons firing. The rescue team was close. The Vexillian guard behind him heard it too and panicked. He raised his weapon toward Jiwon, who was directly ahead of Daeho. The captain didn't think. He just moved. He threw himself at the guard, tackling the alien around the middle. They both went down in a tangle of limbs. The guard was stronger, but Daeho was desperate. He grabbed one of the alien's arms and bit down as hard as he could. The Vexillian screamed. It was the signal the other crew members needed. Tai Min, who had been working on his cell lock for days, had been studying the guard's weapons during the march. He knew how to release the safety catch. When he saw Daeho tackle the guard, he grabbed for the nearest weapon. Other crew members did the same. It was chaotic and messy and dangerous, but they were fighting back. Jiwon grabbed a dropped weapon and fired it wildly down the corridor at the other guards. She had never fired a gun before in her life and had no idea how to aim properly. But at close range in a narrow corridor, it didn't matter. One of the guards went down, then another. The sound of the fight brought Minji's team running. They came around the corner at full speed and immediately assessed the situation. Human civilians fighting Vexillian guards in a desperate close-quarters brawl. The Reavers couldn't shoot without risking hitting the hostages. Minji pulled a concussion grenade from her belt and threw it past the fighting mass of bodies. "Down!" she screamed in English. The crew members who heard her hit the floor. The grenade went off with a flash of light and a wave of pressure. The Vexillian guards were knocked unconscious. The humans, being lower to the ground, were mostly protected. The Reavers rushed forward, securing the area and checking the civilians for injuries. Minji pulled off her helmet so the crew could see her face. "I'm Colonel Minji, Terran Defense Coalition. We're here to get you out. Is everyone here? Is anyone missing?" Dae-ho, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, did a quick count. 15. We're all here. 4 injured, but everyone can walk. Good. Stay close to my team. We're going back to the pods and getting off this station. Minji put her helmet back on and switched to the tactical network. Reaver 1 to all teams. Hostages secured. All units begin withdrawal to extraction points. But Raxthar was not done yet. In his command center, watching his entire operation fall apart, he made one last, desperate decision. If he couldn't have the ransom money, if he couldn't escape, if his entire organization was being destroyed, then he would take as many humans with him as possible. He activated the self-destruct system for the entire station. 5 minutes until the reactor overloaded and destroyed everything within 10 kilometers. Alarms started blaring throughout the station. Minji heard the warning on her suit's computer and cursed. "All teams, the station is self-destructing. Get to your pods now. Double time!" The Reavers started running, half carrying the injured civilians. Behind them, Vexillian guards who had been fighting moments before were now running in the same direction, trying to reach escape pods before the station exploded. The battle was over. Now everyone just wanted to survive. They reached the assault pods and started loading the civilians inside. Each pod could carry the 4-soldier team, plus 2 or 3 civilians if they squeezed. Dae-ho found himself crammed into a pod with Ji-won and 2 armored soldiers. The door sealed, and the pod launched from the station at maximum acceleration. Through the small window, Dae-ho watched the shattered chain grow smaller behind them. Other pods were launching in all directions, some Vexillian escape pods too, and then, in a flash of light brighter than a sun, the station's reactor exploded. The shockwave caught the slower pods and destroyed them. But Minji's team had moved fast enough. The assault pods were already out of range. They docked with the Incheon's Fury 3 minutes later. The pod doors opened and hands reached in to help the civilians out. Medical personnel rushed forward with stretchers and equipment. Dae-ho stepped out onto the deck of the human warship, and his knees almost gave out. They had made it. They were safe. A medical officer tried to lead him toward the infirmary, but Dae-ho pulled away. "Wait, let me see my crew first. I need to know they're all okay." He looked around the docking bay and counted. 15 pods. His crew was scattered across them, being helped out by soldiers and medical staff. One by one, he saw them all. 15 people, every single one alive. Ji-won stumbled over to him, crying and laughing at the same time. Taemin was right behind her, a huge grin on his bruised face. Other crew members gathered around their captain. They had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. Admiral Kyung-soo appeared on the docking bay, walking through the crowd of soldiers and rescued civilians. He stopped in front of Dae-ho and saluted. "Captain, welcome aboard. Your distress beacon made all of this possible." "Well done." Dae-ho, exhausted and hurting, managed to stand straight and return the salute. "Thank you for coming for us, sir. We knew you would." "Of course we came," Kyung-soo said simply. "You're human citizens. We don't leave our people behind." Across the system, the other human warships were hunting down the remaining Vexillian ships. Some surrendered immediately. Others tried to fight and were destroyed. By the end of the day, the Vexillian Corsair presence in this sector had been completely eliminated. And in a small cell on one of the human warships, Raxthar sat alone, a prisoner for the first time in his life, and tried to understand how everything had gone so terribly wrong. The news of the rescue spread across human space within hours. Every news network carried the story. 15 civilians taken hostage by aliens. The Terran Defense Coalition launching a full military response. The destruction of the Vexillian fortress and the safe return of all hostages. people celebrated in the streets. In bars and restaurants across dozens of colonies, strangers bought each other drinks and toasted the brave soldiers who brought their people home. But the news also spread beyond human space, traveling through the complex network of communication relays that connected the various species of the galaxy. And for many aliens, the human response was shocking. Other species had been dealing with the Vexillian corsairs for decades. Other species paid the ransoms because that was how things worked. You paid, got your people back, and everyone moved on. The humans had destroyed an entire criminal organization over 15 hostages. The level of military force used seemed excessive, even insane to many alien observers. 3 days after the rescue, Admiral Kyung-soo held a press conference at the Defense Coalition headquarters on Luna. The huge briefing room was packed with reporters from dozens of news agencies, both human and alien. Camera drones floated in the air, recording everything. The Admiral walked to the podium, and standing beside him were Captain Dae-ho and several members of his crew, still recovering from their injuries but alive and well. Kyung-soo waited for the room to quiet down before speaking. "I'm going to make a brief statement, and then we'll take questions. 3 weeks ago, the civilian merchant vessel Haidong Prosperity was attacked by the Vexillian corsairs. 15 crew members were taken hostage, and a ransom was demanded. The Terran Defense Coalition responded with military force, and I'm pleased to report that all 15 hostages were recovered alive. The Vexillian fortress station Shattered Chain was destroyed, along with most of their operational fleet. We consider this mission a complete success." A reporter raised her hand immediately. "Admiral, some critics are saying the military response was excessive. The ransom demanded was 750 million credits. The cost of deploying the fleet and conducting the rescue operation was over 2 billion credits. Wouldn't it have been cheaper to just pay the ransom?" Kyung-soo looked at her calmly. "The question assumes that the only cost we should consider is measured in money. It ignores the real costs of giving in to criminal demands. If we had paid the ransom, we would have sent a message to every pirate and criminal organization in the galaxy. Humans are easy targets. Take our people hostage and we'll pay to get them back. How many more ships would have been attacked? How many more crew members taken? How many billions would we have spent over the years paying ransom after ransom?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "Instead, we sent a different message. We sent the message that taking human hostages is not profitable. It's dangerous. It will result in military retaliation. And that message, that deterrent effect, is worth far more than 2 billion credits. Because now, criminals know to avoid human targets. The long-term savings in lives and resources is immeasurable." Another reporter, this one an alien with blue skin and large eyes, asked a question in accented English. "Admiral, my species has also lost people to the Vexillian corsairs. We always paid the ransom because we believed it was the only way to get our people back safely. Are you saying we were wrong?" "I'm saying every species has to make their own decisions about how to handle these situations," Kyung-soo replied carefully. "For humans, we decided that we would not negotiate with criminals. We would not allow our citizens to be used as bargaining chips. That's our choice, based on our values and our capabilities. Other species may make different choices, and that's their right." Captain Dae-ho stepped forward to the microphone. He looked tired, with bandages still visible on his face, but his voice was strong. "I'd like to say something, if I may. I've been a merchant captain for 20 years. I've traveled through dangerous space, and I've always known the risks. But I also knew that if something happened, if my ship was taken or my crew was endangered, humanity would come for us. Not because it was cheap, not because it was easy, but because it was right." He gestured to the crew members standing beside him. "These people are not soldiers. They're navigators and engineers and cargo handlers. They're normal people trying to make a living, and when they needed help, when they were trapped and scared and didn't know if they would ever see home again, their government sent warships and special forces soldiers to get them back. That's what it means to be human. We don't abandon each other." The room erupted with more questions, but Kyung-soo raised his hand for silence. "I have one more statement to make, and I want to be very clear about this. What happened to the Vexillian Corsairs was not a one-time event. It was the beginning of an ongoing operation. Over the past month, the Terran Defense Coalition has been systematically hunting down every Vexillian cell we can find. We've destroyed 8 major operations and arrested hundreds of pirates. This will continue until the Vexillian Corsair organization no longer exists." He looked directly at the cameras, knowing his words would be heard across the galaxy. "And this applies not just to the Vexillians. Any organization, any species, any individual who takes human citizens hostage should understand this clearly. We will find you. We will come for you. We don't negotiate. We don't pay ransoms. We send soldiers and we take our people back by force. That is non-negotiable human policy, and it will not change." The press conference continued for another hour, but those words were the ones that were replayed on every news channel. Within days, they had been translated into hundreds of alien languages and spread throughout known space. In criminal networks and pirate havens across dozens of star systems, the message was received and understood. Human targets were now off-limits, too dangerous, not worth the risk. 6 months later, Captain Dae-ho stood on the bridge of the Haedong Prosperity and looked out at the stars. His ship had been repaired and upgraded with new weapons and better defensive systems. The Defense Coalition had also assigned a military escort to patrol the major trade routes, making them much safer for merchant vessels. Navigator Ji-won was back at her station, older now and more confident than she had been before the incident. She had been offered a job on a safer route, closer to Earth, but she had refused. This was her ship, these were her people, and she wasn't going to run away from danger. Engineer Tae-min was in his engine room, humming to himself as he made adjustments to the improved systems. A communication came through from a nearby station. Dae-ho answered it and found himself talking to an alien merchant, a member of a species he had traded with before. The alien looked nervous. "Captain Dae-ho, I heard about what happened to you. I wanted to say that I'm glad you and your crew survived. It was very impressive what your military did." "Thank you," Dae-ho replied. "We were lucky to make it out alive." "More than lucky, I think," the alien said carefully. "I have also had dealings with the Vexillian Corsairs in the past. My own ship was taken hostage 5 years ago. We paid the ransom they demanded. It cost my family everything we had saved. But we paid because we believed there was no other choice." The alien paused, and Dae-ho could see something like regret in his expression. "Now I see that maybe there was another choice. Maybe if more species had refused to pay, had fought back like humans did, the Vexillians would not have become so powerful. Maybe many people would not have lost their savings or their lives." Dae-ho didn't know what to say to that. After a moment, he simply nodded. "Maybe. But every species has to make their own choices. Humans chose to fight. It's not always the easy choice, but it's our choice." After the communication ended, Ji-won spoke from her navigation station. "Captain, are you worried it might happen again? Another attack?" Dae-ho thought about the question. "No," he said finally. "I'm not worried. Oh, space is still dangerous, and there are still pirates out there, but they know now what happens if they take human hostages. Word has spread. We're not easy targets anymore." He looked around his bridge at his crew working at their stations. "And even if something did happen, I know that humanity would come for us again. That knowledge, that certainty, that we won't be abandoned, that makes all the difference. That's what makes me feel safe, even out here in the dark between the stars." The Haedong Prosperity entered faster than light travel, its engines humming smoothly. The journey to the next colony would take 3 days. It would be routine and boring, exactly the way Daiho liked it. In bars and trading posts throughout the galaxy, the story of the Haedong prosperity had become legend. Aliens told each other about the human ship that was taken hostage and the overwhelming military response that followed. Some species viewed humans with new respect. Others viewed them with fear, but everyone understood the lesson. On a small planet on the edge of known space, a group of pirates sat in a dingy bar planning their next target. One of them suggested hitting a human cargo ship that would be passing through their sector. The leader of the group, a scarred veteran of a dozen successful raids, shook his head immediately. "No. Never. We don't touch human ships. Not worth it." "But think of the cargo they carry," the younger pirate protested. "Some of those merchant vessels are worth millions." The leader slammed his drink down on the table hard enough to crack the glass. "I said no. The cargo doesn't matter. The ransom doesn't matter. Nothing matters if you're dead or in a human prison cell. The humans don't play by the same rules as other species. They don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They just send warships and soldiers, and then you're done. I knew a Vexillian who survived the attack on the Shattered Chain. He's working as a janitor now because no one in the criminal world will hire him. Everyone knows the Vexillians made the mistake of taking human hostages, and look what happened to them. Completely destroyed." He looked around the table at his crew. "There are plenty of other targets in the galaxy. Species that pay ransoms, that negotiate, that follow the old rules. We stick to those targets. Human ships are off limits. Spread the word to every crew you know. Anyone stupid enough to ignore this warning deserves what they get." The conversation in that bar was repeated in criminal hideouts across dozens of star systems. The word spread faster than any official message could have traveled. Human citizens were not to be targeted. Not because humans were particularly strong or fierce compared to other species, but because humanity had made it clear that they would pay any price, take any risk, to protect their own. It was a simple message, but it was effective. The number of attacks on human vessels dropped to almost nothing. Pirates found easier targets. Kidnappers looked for victims from species that would actually pay ransoms. And human merchants traveled the space lanes with a new confidence, knowing that their government had their backs. Admiral Kyung-soo, sitting in his office on Luna months after the rescue operation, reviewed the reports and saw the results of Operation Broken Chain. The Vexillian corsairs had been reduced to a handful of scattered cells with no central leadership. Attacks on human targets had dropped by 98%. The cost had been high, but the mission had achieved exactly what it was meant to achieve. An aide brought him a message from the diplomatic corps. Several alien species were requesting meetings to discuss adopting similar policies for their own citizens. They had seen what happened when a government refused to negotiate with criminals, and they wanted to learn from the human example. Kyung-soo smiled as he read the message. Change was coming to the galaxy, slowly but surely. The old system of paying ransoms and hoping for the best was starting to break down. And it had started with one merchant ship, one distress beacon, and one simple principle. Humanity doesn't leave its people behind. He looked out his office window at the Earth hanging in the black sky. Somewhere down there, on that blue and green planet, 15 crew members were reunited with their families. They were back home, safe and sound, because their government had decided that their lives were worth more than any ransom payment. That was the real victory. Not the destroyed pirate station or the rescued hostages or the deterrent effect on future criminals. The real victory was in keeping a promise, the promise that every human citizen could trust. If you need help, we will come for you. No matter the cost, no matter the risk, we will come for you. That was the message humanity sent to the galaxy, and the galaxy learned to listen.